The Apache warrior woman was forsaken after losing her strength. A cowboy came to save her. The early morning sun rose slowly over the rugged plains, casting golden light on the mountains and deserts of the southwest. The air was crisp and clear, filled with the quiet sounds of nature, birds singing, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and the distant calls of animals beginning their day. In this beautiful yet harsh land lived Ayanna, an Apache woman whose name was known far and wide among her people. She was strong, brave, and wise, admired not only for her skills in hunting and tracking, but also for her ability to lead and guide others. From a young age, Ayanna had shown courage beyond her years. She had a sharp mind, a keen eye for the land, and an unshakable spirit. Her presence alone inspired respect. Ayanna had grown up learning the ways of her people, moving silently through the forests, mountains, and plains. She learned how to read the signs of the land, the footprints of animals, the patterns of the wind, and the changing colors of the sky. She could predict the weather, find water in the driest of places, and track animals for food in ways that seemed almost magical. People often said that the land itself spoke to her, and she always listened. Her days were full of activity. She would rise before sunrise, her movements smooth and precise as she prepared for the tasks ahead. She would gather water, check traps, and plan her hunting routes. Ayanna loved these moments of quiet and focus, when the world seemed to belong entirely to her and the land. Yet, she also had a warm heart and a deep sense of responsibility toward her people. She often shared her knowledge, teaching younger members how to survive, how to respect the earth, and how to honor their traditions. She was not only a warrior in skill, but a leader in spirit. Life, however, was not always easy. The world she lived in was full of challenges, from the harsh climate to the scarcity of food during certain seasons. But Ayanna faced every challenge with determination. She never complained, never gave up, and never allowed fear to control her. Her strength, both physical and mental, became a symbol for her tribe. Many looked up to her, seeking guidance and courage in times of trouble. Ayanna's life seemed unshakable, a story of power, respect, and perseverance. One year, a particularly harsh winter approached. The winds grew colder than usual, carrying frost that painted the land in sparkling white. Food became harder to find, and the rivers began to freeze. Ayanna worked tirelessly hunting and gathering, sharing with those who needed it, always ensuring that the community could survive the cold months. But as the days passed, she began to feel a weakness in her body, a tiredness that no rest could cure. At first she ignored it, thinking it was simply the weariness of the long, hard season. But the weakness did not pass. She could no longer move with the speed and precision she once had. Even small tasks, like drawing water from a deep well or climbing the rocky hills, became exhausting. Ayanna tried to hide her struggle. She did not want anyone to see her falter, for she had always been the strong one. But her people noticed. At first they expressed concern, offering to help her rest and recover. Ayanna, proud as she was, refused. She believed that admitting weakness would dishonor her and the hard work she had done all her life. But as weeks passed, her condition worsened. She began to stumble during hunts, drop the tools she once held effortlessly, and sometimes faint from exhaustion. The land that had always seemed to guide her now felt strange and difficult to navigate. It was during one particularly cold morning that she realized something painful. She could not continue as she had before. She felt her strength leaving her, leaving behind only a tired, fragile body. The people she had once led with courage and confidence began to distance themselves. They whispered among themselves, unsure of how to help, unsure if she could still contribute. Their eyes, once filled with respect, now held pity or doubt. Ayanna felt a sharp sting in her heart. She had given everything to her tribe, yet now, when she needed care and support, they turned away. She was no longer the warrior they admired. The realization was crushing. Ayanna felt abandoned, forsaken by those she had loved and protected. She wandered further from the village, seeking solitude in the forests and mountains. The land, which had always been a place of comfort and guidance, now felt cold and indifferent. Each step was heavy, each breath a reminder of her weakening body. She could feel the past strength that had once defined her slipping further and further away. Despite her fear and sadness, Ayana did not give up completely. Deep inside, she held on to a spark of hope, a memory of the courage that had always defined her. She remembered the lessons she had learned as a child, lessons of survival, patience, and resilience. She knew that the land had sustained her before, and that she could learn to survive even now. But the loneliness weighed heavily on her spirit. Nights were long and quiet, filled only with the sounds of the wind and the distant cries of animals. She missed the laughter and chatter of her people, the warmth of shared fires, and the feeling of belonging. Ayana also struggled with a sense of identity. She had always been the strong one, the protector, the guide. Without her strength, she felt lost, unsure of who she was anymore. Every day was a challenge, not only for her body but for her mind and spirit. She often sat by the frozen river staring at her reflection in the icy water, asking herself how she had come to this point. The warrior who had once been unstoppable now felt fragile and uncertain. Even in this dark time, Ayana did not let despair completely consume her. She remembered small joys, the sound of a bird singing, the warmth of the sun on her face, the beauty of the snow-covered plains. She found comfort in simple things and tried to take each day, one step at a time. Though she was weak, she refused to give in entirely. Her spirit, though battered, still carried the courage of a lifetime. As the weeks went on, Ayana slowly learned to adapt to her new reality. She moved carefully, conserving her energy. She hunted smaller animals, gathered plants and roots that were easy to reach, and drank from streams she knew were safe. She learned to rely on her knowledge of the land more than her physical strength, using her mind to overcome obstacles her body could no longer handle. Though her situation was difficult, she discovered a new form of resilience, a quiet, patient strength that did not depend on muscle or speed, but on determination and wisdom. Despite her growing independence, Ayana felt a deep loneliness. She longed for companionship, someone who could understand her struggle, someone who could help her feel human again. She knew that she could survive on her own, but she also knew that life was richer when shared with others. Still, she continued to wander, hoping for a chance encounter, a sign that she was not entirely alone in the world. Ayana's story in these early days of weakness is not one of defeat. Though her body had faltered and her people had turned away, her mind and spirit remained alive. She faced each day with quiet courage, learning to navigate a life that had become more challenging than ever before. She held on to hope, believing that perhaps one day someone would come along who could help her find strength again, not just in her body, but in her heart and spirit. The cold plains stretched endlessly before her, and though the future was uncertain, Ayana moved forward. Each step was a reminder that she had survived hardships before, and though this challenge was different, it did not define her entirely. In the vast silence of the land, she learned patience, humility, and the quiet power of enduring. She knew that life, even in its hardest moments, could still hold moments of beauty and possibility. And so, with a steady breath and a cautious heart, she continued her journey, alone but not broken, waiting for the moment when life might offer her a new beginning. Days turned into weeks, and Ayana continued to wander the rugged plains and forests, her body weaker with each passing day. The sun rose and set with its usual rhythm, painting the mountains in shades of gold and orange, yet the beauty of the world could not lift her spirit completely. The loneliness weighed heavily on her heart. She had always been surrounded by her people, teaching them, helping them, and sharing moments of joy and laughter. Now each step she took was accompanied only by the whisper of the wind and the distant rustle of animals. Ayana learned to be careful with her movements. Her body no longer had the endurance it once did, and she could not afford to exhaust herself unnecessarily. She walked slowly, stopping often to rest, and she observed the signs of nature more closely than ever. She noticed the tracks of deer in the soft soil, the nests of birds hidden in trees, and the small, delicate plants that grew even in the harsh winter. She would eat what she could find, small berries, roots, or the occasional rabbit. Each meal was a victory, a reminder that she could still survive on her own. Even though she was alone, Ayana's mind remained sharp. She thought constantly about her past, the moments when her strength had been unmatched, and the lessons she had learned from her elders. She remembered the stories of her ancestors who had survived countless hardships by relying on their courage and wisdom. These memories gave her some comfort, but they also reminded her of what she had lost. She longed to feel strong again, to be able to move freely through the forests and mountains, and to regain the respect of her people. At times, Ayana's thoughts turned to sadness and frustration. She wondered why her people had abandoned her when she needed them the most. She had always believed that community meant support, that a tribe looked after each other in times of need. Yet now she felt betrayed. The people who had once praised her courage now avoided her, their eyes filled with doubt or pity. Ayana tried to shake these thoughts, reminding herself that her strength was not just in her body but in her mind and spirit. Still, the loneliness was hard to bear. Nights were the hardest. The cold air pierced her weakened body, and she would huddle in caves or under trees for warmth. She would listen to the quiet sounds of the night, the soft hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, and the distant call of coyotes. Sometimes she would dream of her past life, of running swiftly across the plains, her heart full of energy and pride. In her dreams she could feel the wind on her face, hear the sounds of her people around her, and sense the strength that had once been hers. But when she woke, reality returned with its heavy weight, and she had to face her weakness once more. Despite the challenges, Ayana did not give up. She continued to move through the land, learning to adapt to her new reality. She discovered that survival was not just about physical strength, but about patience, careful planning, and awareness. She learned to conserve her energy, to choose her paths wisely, and to listen to the land in ways she had never needed to before. She became more attuned to the subtle signs of nature, the way a branch bent, the pattern of animal tracks, the smell of the earth after rain. Slowly she began to feel a small sense of control returning to her life, even as her body remained weak. Ayana also began to reflect on the meaning of strength. She realized that being strong did not always mean being fast or powerful. True strength, she thought, was in the ability to keep going even when the world seemed against you. It was in finding hope in small things, in appreciating the beauty of life even when it is difficult, and in learning to trust oneself. This understanding became a quiet source of comfort for her, a reminder that she was not entirely lost or defeated. One morning, as she walked along a narrow path through the forest, Ayana heard a soft sound that made her stop in her tracks. It was the faint cry of a small animal trapped in the underbrush. Though she was weak, she moved carefully toward the sound. She found a small fawn caught in a tangle of vines. Its eyes were wide with fear, and its tiny body trembled. Ayana gently freed the animal, using her hands carefully so as not to hurt it. The fawn hesitated for a moment, then bounded away into the safety of the forest. Watching it disappear, Ayana felt a small spark of joy and pride. She realized that even in her weakened state she could still make a difference, still care for the living world around her. This small act of kindness reminded her of the value of compassion and connection. Even though she was alone, she could still act with purpose, still touch the lives of others, whether human or animal. The realization lifted her spirit slightly and gave her a renewed sense of determination. She continued her journey through the forests and plains, her eyes alert for danger, her heart open to moments of beauty and hope. As the days passed, Ayana began to notice other signs that life could still hold surprises. She found a hidden spring deep in the forest where the water was clear and fresh. She discovered a small grove of fruit trees, their branches heavy with berries even in the cold season. These discoveries reminded her that the world still had gifts to offer, even in the harshest conditions. They encouraged her to keep moving, to continue exploring, and to hold on to hope. Yet the feeling of isolation never fully left her. Ayana often thought about her tribe, about the people who had once depended on her guidance. She wondered if they missed her, if they realized the mistake of abandoning her in her time of weakness. She longed for conversation, for companionship, for someone to share her thoughts and fears with. The silence of the plains, once peaceful, now felt heavy and unending. In this solitude, Ayana also learned to listen to herself more deeply. She reflected on her dreams, her fears, and her desires. She thought about the kind of life she wanted, not just for survival but for fulfillment. She realized that even if her tribe did not accept her again, she could still create a meaningful life for herself. This understanding brought a quiet sense of empowerment. She began to see herself not just as a woman who had lost her strength, but as someone capable of resilience, resourcefulness, and courage in new ways. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple, Ayana sat by a small fire she had built. The warmth of the flames was comforting against the cold air. She watched the sparks rise into the sky and thought about the long journey she had traveled so far. She realized that despite the hardships she had survived, and survival itself was a testament to her strength. She allowed herself a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement of her own courage. Even in her weakened state, Ayana began to dream of new possibilities. She imagined meeting others who could help her, learning new skills to regain some of her strength, and perhaps finding a new place where she could belong. Though these thoughts were tentative and cautious, they planted the seeds of hope in her heart. She realized that life, even when difficult, still had opportunities for renewal and growth. As the night grew darker and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Ayana felt a small sense of peace. She wrapped herself in a blanket of animal skins, feeling the warmth against her skin, and closed her eyes. Though the future was uncertain, she trusted that her journey was not over. Somewhere, out in the vast expanse of the plains and forests, there might be someone who could help her, someone who could offer friendship and support. And even if that day never came, she knew that she had the inner strength to continue moving forward, step by step, through the challenges that life presented. In this part of her journey, Ayana learned a valuable lesson. She realized that being alone did not mean being helpless, that weakness could be met with patience and wisdom, and that even the smallest acts of kindness could bring joy and hope. She understood that strength was not just measured in speed or skill, but in the courage to face each day, to adapt, and to continue believing in the possibility of better days ahead. With the first light of dawn, Ayana rose once again. She stretched her limbs carefully, feeling the ache of her body, but also the determination in her heart. She looked out across the plains, her eyes scanning the horizon for signs of life, for signs of hope. Though the world remained vast and challenging, she felt ready to continue her journey, to face the days ahead with quiet courage and patience. The path was uncertain, but Ayana was no longer completely lost. She had learned to survive, to reflect, and to hope, and these gifts would carry her forward toward whatever awaited her next. The wind shifted slightly that morning, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar. Ayana paused on a narrow trail, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She had grown accustomed to reading the land, knowing which way the deer had gone, which areas were safe to cross, and where the streams ran clear. But this scent was new. It was the smell of leather, smoke, and horse, a human presence that was neither friend nor foe, at least not yet. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with curiosity. She had been alone for so long that the sound of another person's presence stirred something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Through the trees, she saw a figure approaching. A man on horseback, his wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the sun, rode slowly and carefully. His horse was strong and steady, moving with a calm confidence that suggested the rider was experienced. The man seemed cautious, but there was also a kind of gentle determination in his movements. Ayana instinctively ducked behind a tree, watching quietly. She had learned long ago to be wary of strangers. Some humans brought danger, and she was not strong enough to defend herself easily. Yet, something about the man felt different. The cowboy dismounted near a small creek, tying his horse to a tree. He knelt and filled a water pouch, glancing around as if he knew the land well, yet still respected it. He hummed softly, a low tune that seemed to blend with the rustle of the wind. Ayana's curiosity grew. She wondered who he was, where he had come from, and why he had ventured so far into the wilderness. Her mind raced with questions, but she stayed hidden, observing. Days had passed since Ayana had encountered any other humans. The isolation had left her cautious, yet she found herself longing for a sign that she was not entirely alone. She had survived the harsh winters, the frozen streams, and the empty plains, but she still craved companionship. Now, watching this cowboy, she felt a mixture of fear and hope. Perhaps this encounter could change the course of her lonely journey. The man began to move along the creek, carefully examining the ground. He seemed to notice something unusual, stopping frequently to study the tracks in the dirt. Ayana watched silently, recognizing some of the patterns from her own experience in tracking. He was skilled, but not as practiced as she once had been. She allowed herself a small smile, realizing that perhaps this stranger could be trusted. Yet she stayed hidden, unwilling to reveal herself too quickly. After a while, the cowboy began speaking softly, as if talking to himself.
"This land is rough," he said.
"Winter must have been hard on whoever lives out here. I hope they're all right." Ayana's ears perked up. He spoke with kindness and concern, not arrogance or judgment. His words carried warmth, and for the first time in weeks, Ayana felt a small flicker of relief. Perhaps this man was different from the strangers she had feared. The cowboy moved carefully through the forest, stopping occasionally to mark his path. He seemed patient, respectful of the land, and aware of its dangers. Ayana admired this quietly. He did not rush or force his way through. He moved as if he were part of the land itself, aware of its rhythms and its secrets. She realized that she could learn from someone like this, or at the very least, she could observe safely from a distance. As the sun climbed higher, the man reached a small clearing. He placed his pack on the ground and pulled out a piece of jerky and a flask of water. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and then sat quietly, looking around with thoughtful eyes. Ayana noticed the gentleness in his demeanor. He was strong and capable, yet not harsh or demanding. There was a sense of balance in him, a calm that was almost contagious. She felt drawn to it, though she did not dare approach. The days passed, and Ayana continued to watch the cowboy from a distance. She noticed the little things, how he tended to his horse, how he built a small fire at night, and how he treated the land with respect. She began to feel a sense of admiration mixed with a cautious hope. Perhaps he could become a companion, someone who could help her navigate the challenges she still faced. Her heart, long hardened by loneliness, began to soften slightly. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plains, Ayana found herself trapped in a sudden snowstorm. The wind whipped fiercely, and the snow fell thickly, reducing visibility to almost nothing. She struggled to find shelter, her weak body shivering from the cold. Panic threatened to rise within her, but then she heard a familiar voice calling softly through the wind. "Hey there! Are you all right? Can you hear me?" Ayana's heart leapt. The voice was calm, kind, and full of concern. She called out hesitantly, unsure if it would reach him. I'm here!" she shouted, her voice trembling. Moments later, the cowboy appeared through the snow, guiding his horse carefully to where she was. "There you are," he said gently, offering her a thick blanket he carried. "It's too cold to stay out here alone. Let's get you somewhere warm." Ayana hesitated, but the desperation in her body and the warmth of his presence convinced her to accept his help. She wrapped the blanket around herself, feeling a comfort she had not experienced in months. The cowboy helped her onto his horse carefully, his movements steady and patient. Together, they rode to a small cabin he had prepared in a clearing, safe from the storm. For the first time in weeks, Ayana felt protected, cared for, and less alone. Inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire melted some of her tension. The cowboy handed her a cup of hot tea and smiled kindly. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he said softly. Ayana nodded, unsure of what to say. Words had become difficult, weighed down by exhaustion and loneliness. But the simple act of being listened to, of being acknowledged without judgment, was healing. Over the following days, Ayana and the cowboy, who introduced himself as Samuel, began to build a cautious friendship. He provided her with food, blankets, and care, but he never tried to rush her or demand anything from her. Instead, he offered help gently, respecting her space and her independence. Ayana began to trust him, slowly letting go of the walls she had built around herself. She realized that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with patience and kindness. Samuel also shared stories of his own life, speaking of the plains, the mountains, and the challenges he had faced. Ayana listened carefully, recognizing in his experiences the same respect for nature and determination she had always valued. They talked about the animals, the land, and even small things like the patterns of the stars in the night sky. Each conversation built a connection between them, bridging the gap of loneliness that had grown so deep in Ayana's heart. The more time they spent together, the more Ayana realized that strength came in many forms. Samuel's strength was different from hers. It was quiet, patient, and steadfast. He did not rely solely on skill or speed, but on careful thought, observation, and respect. In witnessing his approach to life, Ayana began to feel inspired. Perhaps her own strength could take a new form, one that did not depend solely on her physical abilities, but on wisdom, resilience, and connection. One morning, Samuel led Ayana to a small clearing where the snow had melted, revealing fresh green grass. "There's beauty everywhere, even when it seems hidden," he said. "Sometimes it just takes patience to find it." Ayana smiled, realizing that he was right. Even in her weakened state, life still offered moments of hope, and there were still paths to follow, even if they were different from those she had once walked alone. With Samuel's help, Ayana began to regain small pieces of confidence. She started moving more, practicing simple exercises to strengthen her body without overexerting herself. Samuel guided her patiently, encouraging her gently, never rushing or pressuring. Together, they explored the land, facing small challenges and celebrating each victory. Slowly, Ayana felt a sense of hope returning to her heart, a feeling she had almost forgotten. By the time the snow melted completely and the first signs of spring appeared, Ayana realized that her life was changing. She was no longer alone, and she was learning to trust again. Samuel had become not just a helper, but a friend, someone who saw her value beyond her physical strength. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but with him by her side, she felt capable of facing whatever came next. Ayana had survived isolation, weakness, and fear, and now, with Samuel's gentle guidance and companionship, she began to see a future filled with possibilities. She realized that life could still be beautiful, that connections could still be made, and that strength could be found in unexpected forms. She had been alone for so long, but she was no longer lost. The bond between them grew steadily, rooted in mutual respect, shared experience, and the quiet understanding that comes from facing challenges together. Ayana knew that her journey was far from over, but with Samuel by her side, she could face it with courage and hope. She had been forsaken once, left to survive on her own, but now she had found a companion who would help her reclaim not only her strength but also her faith in life and people. Spring had fully arrived, and the plains and forests began to awaken with life once again. Small buds appeared on trees, streams ran freely, and the air was filled with the songs of birds returning after the winter. For Ayana, it felt like a new beginning. The snow and cold that had tested her body and spirit were gone, replaced by warmth, growth, and possibility. She had been alone for so long that this new season felt almost like magic, as if the land itself was encouraging her to regain what she had lost. Samuel had been a steady presence through the change of seasons. Every day he offered his support without judgment, teaching Ayana small lessons in patience, endurance, and care. He showed her how to move safely through rough terrain, how to find fresh water and edible plants, and how to conserve energy without giving up. Though she was still weaker than before, Ayana began to notice small improvements. Her steps were steadier, her breath longer, and her confidence returning slowly but surely. One morning, Samuel suggested they take a walk to a nearby ridge. "The view from the top will show you how far you've come," he said. Ayana hesitated at first, unsure if her body could handle the climb. But she trusted Samuel and agreed. Step by step, they moved through the winding paths, Ayana's muscles complaining at first but gradually adjusting. Samuel walked beside her, encouraging her gently, reminding her to breathe steadily and to rest when needed. Each pause was not a sign of weakness, he explained, but a part of learning to move wisely. As they reached the ridge, Ayana looked out over the plains below. The rivers sparkled in the sunlight, the forest stretched endlessly, and the mountains rose proudly in the distance. She felt a rush of emotions, pride, hope, and a quiet joy she had not felt in months. Samuel smiled at her from beside the ridge. "See? You made it. Step by step you can reach any place you set your mind to," he said. Ayana nodded, feeling the truth of his words in her heart. It was more than just the climb. It was a reminder that she could face challenges even when they seemed impossible. Over the following weeks, Samuel and Ayana began to establish a routine. Mornings were spent exploring the land, learning to move carefully, and practicing simple exercises to strengthen her body. Afternoons were for gathering food, tending to small tasks, and sometimes just sitting together by the fire, sharing stories and observing the world around them. Each day, Ayana felt a little stronger, a little more capable. She realized that strength did not always return all at once. It came gradually, through persistence, patience, and care. Samuel also encouraged Ayana to reconnect with her own skills. He would set small challenges, such as following animal tracks, finding fresh water, or identifying edible plants. At first, Ayana worried she might fail. Her body had grown weak, and her confidence had suffered. But Samuel reminded her that mistakes were part of learning, not signs of failure. Slowly, she regained the sharp instincts and clever thinking that had once made her a respected warrior. Each small success boosted her morale and reminded her of the courage that still lived within her. During this time, Ayana also began to notice other aspects of life she had forgotten. The way sunlight danced on leaves, the sound of water flowing over rocks, the delicate beauty of a bird building its nest. All these small wonders reminded her that life was full of beauty, even in hardship. Samuel often pointed out these details, encouraging her to observe and appreciate it. "The world is full of lessons," he said. "You just have to be willing to see them." Ayana began to see the truth in his words, realizing that strength was not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual. One day they came across a small clearing where wildflowers had begun to bloom. The colors were bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the harsh winters she had endured. Ayana bent down to touch the flowers, feeling their delicate petals against her fingers. She smiled, a feeling of peace settling over her. Samuel watched her with a gentle smile. "Sometimes beauty reminds us why we keep moving forward," he said. Ayana nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Life, she realized, had moments of joy even when it was difficult. As the days grew longer and warmer, Samuel began teaching Ayana practical skills that would help her regain full independence. He showed her how to build stronger shelters, how to prepare food more efficiently, and how to move through the land safely without exhausting herself. These lessons were not just about survival, they were about confidence. Each time Ayana mastered a new skill, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. Her body was growing stronger, but her spirit was also being rebuilt. One morning, Samuel suggested they try a small hunting exercise. "We'll start small," he said. "Nothing too difficult. Just enough to help you practice and regain your confidence." Ayana agreed, her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. They moved through the forest quietly, observing the movements of the animals and planning their approach carefully. Though Ayana's body was not yet as strong as it had once been, her mind was sharp, and she used her knowledge of the land to guide them. The exercise was a success, and Ayana felt a surge of pride. She realized that her abilities were returning, not all at once but steadily, through patience and practice. Beyond physical strength, Ayana also began to trust Samuel more deeply. She shared stories of her past, of her people, and of the challenges she had faced. Samuel listened without judgment, offering gentle encouragement and understanding. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with lessons, laughter, and sometimes quiet reflection. Ayana felt a sense of connection she had not experienced in a long time. She realized that trust and friendship were just as important as physical strength in rebuilding her life. One afternoon they came across a small herd of deer grazing peacefully in a meadow. Ayana's instincts stirred, reminding her of her days as a skilled tracker. She observed the deer carefully, noting their movements and patterns. Samuel watched quietly, giving her space to reconnect with her skills. When she suggested a plan to move closer for observation, Samuel nodded in agreement. Ayana felt a thrill of excitement and accomplishment. Her mind and spirit were returning to life, alongside her growing strength. As the weeks continued, Ayana and Samuel faced small challenges together, from navigating tricky terrain to finding clean water sources. Each success built Ayana's confidence, teaching her that strength was not lost forever. She learned to rely on both her mind and her body, combining wisdom, observation, and patience to overcome obstacles. With each passing day, she felt more capable, more alive, and more ready to face whatever the future held. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Ayana and Samuel sat together by a campfire. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of pink and orange, reflecting in the calm river nearby. Ayana reflected on her journey so far, her isolation, her struggle, and the slow rebuilding of her strength. She realized that she had learned something important, that life's challenges could be overcome, not just through raw power, but through patience, resilience, and the support of others. Samuel noticed the thoughtful expression on her face. "You've come a long way," he said gently. "I can see the change in you. Not just your strength, but your spirit. You're ready for more now." Ayana smiled, feeling warmth and gratitude. She realized that she was no longer just surviving. She was living, learning, and growing once again. By the end of Part 4, Ayana had regained much of her confidence, both physically and emotionally. She could move through the forests and plains with skill, observe and track animals, and handle small challenges with growing independence. But more importantly, she had learned to trust again, to appreciate life's beauty, and to find strength not only in her body, but in her mind and heart. Samuel had become a true companion, guiding her patiently and teaching her that strength came in many forms. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but Ayana no longer faced it with fear. She had discovered that even after being forsaken, life could offer friendship, hope, and renewal. She had regained her courage and was ready to face whatever challenges awaited her, knowing that she was not alone. With Samuel by her side, she felt a sense of purpose and determination that had been missing for so long. Ayana's story in this part of her journey was no longer one of struggle alone, but one of growth, learning, and rediscovery. She had learned that strength was not only about physical power. It was about resilience, patience, trust, and the courage to move forward despite uncertainty. Each step she took, each challenge she overcame, and each moment of connection with Samuel strengthened her spirit and reminded her that life still held promise and beauty. As night fell, the stars twinkled above the plains, and Ayana felt a sense of peace. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she had taken the first steps toward reclaiming her life. Her past hardships had not defeated her. They had shaped her, teaching her lessons that no strength alone could provide. And with Samuel's guidance and friendship, she was ready to continue, embracing the adventures, challenges, and joys that lay ahead. Spring had turned fully into summer, and the plains were alive with color and sound. Wild flowers stretched across the meadows, rivers flowed freely with clear water, and the trees were filled with leaves that danced in the warm breeze. For Ayana, the world felt alive in a way she had not experienced since before her illness. Her body had grown stronger, her spirit was renewed, and her heart felt lighter. She moved through the land with confidence now, her steps steady and sure. Yet the lessons of weakness and solitude remained in her mind, reminding her of the journey she had traveled. Each morning she and Samuel would rise with the sun, preparing for the day together. They walked through the forests and plains, checking on the streams and observing the animals. Samuel encouraged her to use her skills not only for survival but also for understanding and appreciating the land. Ayana found herself noticing patterns in nature more deeply than ever. How the deer moved across the meadows, how the birds built their nests, and how the wind shifted through the trees. She realized that this awareness was a form of strength, one that complemented her physical abilities. Ayana had also regained the skill and precision that had once made her a respected warrior. She could track animals with care, move through forests without disturbing the ground, and find water and food in even the most challenging areas. But more importantly, she had learned the value of patience, reflection, and trust. Strength, she understood now, was not only about speed or power. It was about knowing yourself, respecting the world around you, and moving carefully yet boldly through life. One afternoon, while walking along a riverbank, Ayana noticed a family of deer drinking from the water. She felt a thrill of excitement, remembering her early days as a tracker and hunter, but this time she moved with a gentleness she had not known before. Samuel watched her quietly, a proud smile on his face. "You've come so far," he said softly. "Not just in skill, but in the way you approach life. You've found balance." Ayana nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She realized that her strength was no longer only for survival. It was for living fully, with awareness, care, and joy. Summer days were filled with small adventures and achievements. Ayana and Samuel explored deeper into the plains, discovering hidden groves, clean springs, and quiet meadows. They built stronger shelters together, prepared nutritious meals from the land, and shared stories in the evenings by the fire. These shared experiences strengthened their bond. Ayana realized that companionship was not just about help, but about understanding, respect, and shared moments of joy. Samuel had become more than a helper. He was a friend, a guide, and a part of her life she had come to cherish deeply. One day they came across an area where wild berries grew in abundance. Ayana's eyes lit up at the sight. "I used to gather berries with my family when I was young," she said, her voice filled with a soft nostalgia. Samuel smiled. "Then let's gather them together," he said. They worked side by side, filling baskets and laughing at small missteps along the way. Ayana felt a simple happiness she had almost forgotten, the joy of shared work, of companionship, and of being alive in the world again. Beyond physical tasks, Samuel encouraged Ayana to reflect on her journey and the lessons she had learned. He would ask questions, gently prompting her to consider her experiences. "What have you discovered about yourself, Ayana?" he asked one evening, as they sat watching the sunset. She thought carefully, feeling the warmth of the fire and the calm of the evening. "I've learned that strength is more than the body," she said finally. "It's patience, courage, hope, and trust. Even when we are weak, life has a way of helping us grow if we keep moving forward." Samuel nodded, proud of her insight. "Exactly," he said. "You've not only regained your strength, but you've discovered wisdom too." Over time, Ayana began to feel ready to reconnect with her people. Though she had been forsaken and left alone in her time of weakness, she no longer carried bitterness in her heart. She had grown stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. She realized that the respect of others was valuable, but more important was her own respect for herself and the trust and companionship she had found with Samuel. She knew she could return to her tribe with courage and pride, or she could continue her life in the wilderness, building a new home with Samuel. Before making any decision, Ayana wanted to test herself one last time. She suggested to Samuel that they travel to a ridge she had once known, a place she had loved in her youth. It was a challenging journey, requiring careful navigation and endurance. Samuel agreed, supporting her but allowing her to lead. Step by step, Ayana moved through forests, over hills, and across streams. Her body was strong now, her movements precise, but she also carried the lessons of patience and observation that Samuel had taught her. By the time they reached the ridge, Ayana felt a deep sense of achievement. She had regained her confidence fully, and she knew that she could face whatever lay ahead. As they stood together on the ridge, looking out over the vast plains below, Ayana felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought of the harsh winters, the loneliness, and the struggles that had brought her to this point. She realized that each challenge had shaped her, teaching her lessons that no easy victory could provide. Her journey had been difficult, but it had given her strength, wisdom, and the ability to appreciate life fully. Samuel stood quietly beside her, offering support and companionship, a reminder that strength was also about connection. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in gold and pink, Ayanna and Samuel returned to their small cabin. The fire crackled warmly, and the air was filled with the scent of the forest. Ayanna reflected on all she had experienced: the weakness, the loneliness, the slow rebuilding, and the companionship that had transformed her life. She realized that her journey was not just about surviving, but about thriving, learning, and finding hope even in the darkest times. Over the following weeks, Ayanna and Samuel began to help others who were traveling through the plains. They shared food, guidance, and shelter with those in need. Using the skills Ayanna had regained and the wisdom she had acquired, people who had once doubted or ignored Ayanna would now see her as a symbol of resilience and courage. She understood that her journey had prepared her not just to live for herself, but to contribute positively to the lives of others. Ayanna also found joy in teaching again, passing on her knowledge of tracking, survival, and understanding the land. Samuel encouraged her to share her experiences with patience and care, and she found deep satisfaction in guiding others. Through this, she realized that true strength was not just about what one could do alone, but about the ability to help others and create positive impact in the world. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, Ayanna and Samuel sat quietly by the river. The water reflected the golden light, and the land seemed peaceful and alive. Ayanna spoke softly, her eyes thoughtful. "I never thought I could feel whole again," she said. "But now I know that even after losing so much, life can give us hope, friendship, and strength in ways we never expect." Samuel smiled, reaching out to gently touch her hand. "And you found it," he said. "Not just strength, but courage, wisdom, and connection." "You are truly remarkable, Ayanna." By the end of Part 5, Ayanna had fully reclaimed her strength and spirit. She moved through the world with confidence, grace, and patience. She had learned that life's hardships could be overcome, that companionship and trust were invaluable, and that hope could flourish even after the darkest times. With Samuel by her side, she had a partner who shared her journey, respected her independence, and encouraged her growth. Ayanna's story became a testament to resilience, redemption, and the power of human connection. She had been forsaken, left to face the world alone, and yet she had found a way not only to survive, but to thrive. Her journey was a reminder that strength is not only physical, it is also emotional, spiritual, and shared. With courage, patience, and the support of others, even the most challenging circumstances can lead to renewal and hope. As the sun set on the plains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Ayanna stood with Samuel, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had faced hardship, regained her strength, and discovered the true meaning of connection and trust. The future remained full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace it fully. Her journey had come far, but it had also just begun, filled with hope, friendship, and the promise of new adventures in the beautiful land she called home.